Sorry, when I was sharing, I lost the camera feed. So now I'm okay. Yes. Oop, I was okay. Should be good now. Can everybody see me okay? Is my sound good? Hey, Margot, how are you? Okay, Bonnie says my sound's good. But I seem to be having camera problems tonight, and I know not why. It's gone again. I don't know. I have no idea why. Let me see what happens when I tweak it a little bit. Hmm. 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 Okay, let's hope it holds now. Camera seems to be all right. Sound seems to be all right. So what I wanted to talk about this evening was the Green New Deal plan that was released by Bernie Sanders today. It is a very, very important plan. I was reading it over this afternoon, spending some time with Bonnie and reading it to her. And this plan was so great. It really got me emotional. Anyway, the way I plan to handle it, and I should add that I meant for tonight, okay, to discuss the criminal justice plan, okay, that Senator Warren put forward last week. and also the workplace democracy plan that Bernie Sanders put forward over the weekend, over last weekend. But now I'm going to postpone consideration of those because I think that the Green New Deal plan is just so very important that I want to get to discussing that. And I also think that's going to take a long time to finish. So, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to discuss it in parts. And I'll provide 45 minutes of discussion from now. So I'll roughly finish at 9:45 Eastern's time, and I'll take your questions and your statements. And then tomorrow night, I'll do another 45 minutes, and then do another 45 minutes on Saturday night, each time having some discussion after the initial 45 minutes. And I'll just continue this way until we finish with this plan, because it really deserves all the attention that it can get. And so here's here's my Facebook page. Sorry about that, but it'll be just a moment till I have the plan up. Should be up there right now. Yes, it is. The Green New Deal. Here I am in the left-hand corner. See if I can move myself up a little bit. No, I guess this is about as far as I can go right now. So I'll be in the left-hand corner on your left as you watch the screen. And I'll be commenting on the plan and reading some of it, but not all of it. It's very, very, very detailed. So it reads, climate change is a global emergency. The Amazon rainforest is burning, Greenland's ice shelf is melting, and the Arctic is on fire. People across the country and the world are already experiencing the deadly consequences of our climate crisis, as extreme weather events like heat waves, wildfires, droughts, floods, and hurricanes upend entire communities, ecosystems, economies, and ways of life, as well as endanger millions of lives. Communities of color, working class people, and the global poor have borne and will bear this burden disproportionately. The scientific community is telling us in no uncertain terms we have less than 11 years left to transform our energy system away from fossil fuels to energy efficiency and sustainable energy if we're going to leave this planet healthy and habitable for ourselves, our children, grandchildren, and future generations. As rising temperatures and extreme weather create health emergencies, drive land loss and displacement, destroy jobs, and threaten livelihoods, we must guarantee health care, housing, and a good paying job to every American, especially to those who have been historically excluded from economic prosperity. I think saying that we have just about less than 11 years left to transform our energy system away may be a little too optimistic. It may, in fact, turn out that we have less than 5 years left, actually. That's what some of the reports are now showing from some of the organizations, that are out there. The scope of the challenge ahead of us shares similarities with the crisis faced by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the 1940s. Battling a war on two fronts, both in the East and the West, the United States came together and within 3 short years restructured the entire economy in order to win the war and defeat fascism. As president, Bernie Sanders will boldly embrace the moral imperative of addressing the climate crisis and act immediately to mobilize millions of people across the country in support of the Green New Deal. From the Oval Office to the streets, Bernie will generate the political will necessary for a wholesale transformation of our society, with support for frontline and vulnerable communities, and massive investments in sustainable energy, energy efficiency, and a transformation of our transportation system. We need a president who has the courage, the vision, and the record to face down the greed of fossil fuel executives and the billionaire class who stand in the way of climate action. We need a president who welcomes their hatred. Bernie will lead our country to enact the Green New Deal and bring the world together to defeat the existential threat of climate change. So Bernie here is framing himself as the second coming, okay, of FDR. As president, Bernie Sanders will avert climate catastrophe and create 20 million new jobs. I think that that's an underestimate. I think this program will create 30 million new jobs, and I think there's room for 30 million new jobs. But that's a discussion for another time. As president, Bernie Sanders will launch the decade of the Green New Deal, a 10-year nationwide mobilization centered around justice and equity, during which climate change will be factored into virtually every area of policy, from immigration to trade to foreign policy and beyond. This plan outlines some of the most significant goals we have set and steps we will take during this mobilization, including, and then there are bullet points. Okay, now this is the introduction to the plan. It's essentially the executive summary of the plan. So, first bullet point, reaching 100% renewable energy for electricity and transportation by no later than 2030, and complete decarbonization by 2050 at the latest. Now, this is the most ambitious plan I've seen thus far, but I have to say these goals may be less than we need in terms of the ambition of these particular goals. We may have to complete our decarbonization by 2035. We're certainly going to have to be zero neutral, I believe, with respect to carbon. Okay, that is, we'll have to decarbonize a greater amount of carbon, or sequester, okay, a greater amount of carbon than we emit by, I don't know, perhaps 2025, 2027. We really have to go faster than the IPCC goals. They, it appears, were too conservative. By expanding, Bernie says, the existing federal the existing federal power marketing administrations to build new solar, wind, and geothermal energy sources. The second bullet point is ending unemployment by creating 20 million jobs needed to solve the climate crisis. So here he's acknowledging that we don't really have full employment, because under the U3 statistic, we're probably talking about needing 6 or 7 million jobs to get to zero unemployment on the U3 statistic. So he's saying that in order to employ all those in the workforce who want a job, we're going to need an additional 13 million jobs. which is how he's getting to the 20 million jobs. These jobs will be good paying union jobs with strong benefits and safety standards in steel and in auto manufacturing, construction, energy efficiency, uh, energy efficiency retrofitting, coating and server farms, and renewable power plants. Will also create millions of jobs in sustainable agriculture, engineering, a reimagined and expanded civilian conservation corps, and preserving our public lands. And you'll remember that the CCC was one of the main programs of the New Deal back in the 1930s and 1940s. Okay. Uh, and the third bullet point, directly invest an historic 16.3 trillion public investment towards these efforts, in line with the mobilization of resources made during the New Deal and World War II, but with an explicit choice to include Black, Indigenous, and other minority communities who were systematically excluded in the past. So here he's talking about everybody in and nobody out, and that principle not only important in Medicare for All, but also important in the Green by New Deal area. 16.3 trillion public investment is an average of 1.63 trillion per year over 10 years. That may not be enough. We've seen some other estimates, not from any presidential candidates, mind you, who are way behind the 16.3 trillion, in public investments. But we've seen some articles from well thought out pieces that have suggested as much as 4 to 6 trillion per year spent on a Green New Deal. Now, I don't know if that's directly comparable to Bernie's plan, because he may be defining the Green New Deal in a narrower way than the Green New Deal was actually defined by the writers, and where they may have included, let's say, a Medicare for All plan in as part of the Green New Deal, and infrastructure plans, as part of the Green New Deal, going further than Bernie's plan. I don't think these estimates are directly comparable, but in Bernie's case, certainly the $16.3 trillion public investment plan, if we compare it, if we look at 1.63 trillion per year, and we compare that to what we're spending on the military right now, we're spending about 750 billion. So Bernie is saying twice the amount we're now spending on the Defense Department. So that is a very, very sizable investment. Also, it so happens that it's, as we'll see, Bernie plans to cut down the money we spend on our Defense Department appreciably. I personally wouldn't be surprised if he cut it by 50%, so that we're down to $375 trillion. But anyway, that's also another separate issue from the plan itself. So he's thinking about 1.63 trillion per year public investment toward these efforts, in line with the mobilization of resources made during the New Deal and World War II. Now, I guess I read that already, so I'll go on. A just transition for workers. That is the next bullet point. This plan will prioritize the fossil fuel workers who have powered our economy for more than a century, and have too often been neglected by corporations and politicians. We will guarantee 5 years of a worker's current salary, housing assistance, job training, health care, pension support, and priority job placement for any displaced worker, as well as early retirement support for those who choose it or who can no longer work. So, what Bernie is saying there, okay, what he's doing there is he's not only saying that because it's the right thing to do, he's also saying that, I think, because he wants to turn Kentucky red, Kentucky blue. He wants to turn Pennsylvania blue. He wants to turn Tennessee blue. He wants to turn West Virginia blue. Did I already say West Virginia? And Pennsylvania blue. In other words, in all the states where there has been coal mining, where there is coal mining going on now, he wants to provide a guaranteed transition with a great deal of support for the fossil fuel workers who will be out of work. Now, this also counts towards, of course, the workers in the oil industry who will be out of work. There would be a lot of people in Texas put out of work. They need a transition. There would be a lot of people in Pennsylvania who would be put out of work. There would be a lot of people in North Dakota and South Dakota probably who would be put out of work. Every place where there's fracking going on now, there would be people put out of work who need a transition, who need it to be just, who need it to be fair, who need it to be a transition that will pay them a living. That's because it's the right thing to do, but it's also because Bernie and we need their votes. We need to overcome their resistance based on personal self-interest. So, next bullet point, declaring climate change a national emergency. He says we must take action to ensure a habitable climate for ourselves, for our children, for our grandchildren. We will do whatever it takes to defeat the threat of climate change. Next, saving families money by weatherizing homes and lowering energy bills, building affordable and high-quality modern public transportation, providing grants and trade-in programs for families and small businesses to purchase high-efficiency electric vehicles, and rebuilding our inefficient and crumbling infrastructure, including deploying a universal, affordable, high-speed internet. I want to emphasize here that I probably won't have a chance to get into the details of the electric vehicle program until tomorrow, but just to give you a preview, he has a wonderful program for getting the fossil fuel vehicles we have now, that most of us have now, off the road. And there's a tremendous amount of money that he's going to allocate to get people to turn in the fossil fuel vehicles that are creating so much damage and get into high efficiency electric vehicles instead. And there's a considerable amount of money in this plan as well for building an infrastructure where people can power up their vehicles, an infrastructure comparable to the gas stations that we have now for our fossil fuel vehicles. vehicles. Okay, and the program includes also not only our personal vehicles, but buses, trucks for shipping. It's very, very comprehensive, and it's very, very well funded. They have really costed this out in terms of what it is likely to cost. The next, supporting small family farms by investing in ecological, regenerative, and sustainable agriculture. This plan will transform our agricultural system to fight climate change, provide sustainable local foods, and break the corporate stranglehold on farmers and ranchers. So important, so important. Next bullet point, justice for frontline communities, especially under resourced groups, communities of color, Native Americans, people with disabilities, children, and the elderly. That's me. To recover from and prepare for the climate impacts, including through a $40 billion climate justice resiliency fund. Okay, I don't know if that's enough at this point. It's only $4 billion a year, but let's see how they use it and how it goes. There's always more where that came from. With Bernie, there's always more because Bernie knows how to make more. And providing those frontline and fence line communities a just transition, including real jobs, resilient infrastructure, and economic development. And when he says economic development, he's not kidding, as you'll see when I go through the details of that in the coming days. Commit to reducing emissions throughout the world. Here he's talking about our international responsibility, okay, including providing $200 billion to the Green Climate Fund, the International Green Climate Fund. $200 billion, $20 billion a year, that too might be too little. Rejoining the Paris Agreement and reasserting the leadership of the United States in the global fight against climate change. Next, meeting and exceeding our fair share of global emissions reductions. The United States has for over a century spewed carbon pollution emissions into the atmosphere in order to gain economic standing in the world. Therefore, we have an outsized obligation to help less industrialized countries meet their targets while improving quality of life. We will reduce domestic emissions by at least 71% by 2030 and reduce emissions among less industrialized nations by 36% by 2030, the total equivalent of reducing our domestic emissions by 161%. That is a staggering figure, an interesting figure, but we may have to do it by quicker than by 2030 to head off the worst of what seems about to happen. Next bullet point. Making massive investments in R&D. We will invest in public research to drastically reduce the cost of energy storage, okay, of electric vehicles, and make our plastic more sustainable through advanced chemistry. I'm not sure how that's going to be done, but there's more on that in the detail of the plan that we'll be going over later. Expanding the climate justice movement. We will do this by coming together in a truly inclusive movement that prioritizes young people, workers, indigenous peoples, communities of color, and other historically marginalized groups to take on the fossil fuel industry and other polluters to push this over the finish line and lead the globe in solving the climate crisis. Investing in conservation and public lands to heal our soils, forests, and our prairie lands. We will reauthorize and expand the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, and fully fund the Land and Water Conservation Corps, the LWCC, to provide good paying jobs building green infrastructure. This plan will pay for itself over 15 years. Experts have scored the plan and its economic effects We will pay for the massive investment we need to reverse the climate crisis by, and here are subsidiary bullet points, making the fossil fuel industry pay for their pollution through litigation, fees, and taxes, and eliminating federal fossil fuel subsidies. Second bullet point, generating revenue from the wholesale of energy produced by the regional power marketing authorities. The revenues will be collected from 2023 to 2035, and after 2035 will be virtually free, aside from operations and maintenance costs for the regional the power marketing authorities. Next, scaling back our military spending on maintaining global oil dependence. So let me explain that. He and his staff have ideas on how much of our military spending is currently made to maintain our dependence on oil produced outside of the United States. And what he's saying is, whatever that figure is, that military spending will be scaled back because he plans to end global oil dependence. Next, collecting new income tax revenue from the 20 million new jobs created by the plan. Next bullet point, reduced need for federal and state safety net spending due to the creation of millions of good paying unionized jobs. And finally, making the wealthy and large corporations pay their fair share. And he says the cost of inaction is unacceptable. Economists estimate that if we do not take action, we will lose 34.5 trillion in economic activity by the end of the century. And the benefits are enormous. By taking bold and decisive action, we will save 2.9 trillion over 10 years, 21 trillion over 30 years, and 70.4 trillion over 80 years. Now, I beg to differ, but it seems to me that we would sustain economic losses from climate change, but actually far greater than these. So we will save far more than these figures. I mean, 70.4 trillion over a period of 80 years is less than $1 trillion a year. I'm certain climate change is going to cost us a lot more than $1 trillion a year as the costs really mount up. In other words, we can see what we're getting into now. Once the Arctic ice is gone, perhaps 3 years from now, things are going to suddenly get much, much worse. Once the Greenland ice cap thoroughly goes, much, much worse. Antarctica is coming apart at the seams. Sea level is going to rise, perhaps by 20 feet or something like that, once it all melts. That is going to be catastrophic in many places. We're going to have people migrating all over the earth, and it's going to make the numbers we're getting from Latin America now look like a minor thing. In fact, it is a minor thing. We'll be getting people knocking on our doors, and all the major industrial nations will have that all over the world. And there'll be wars, and there'll be conflicts, and we're going to have to scale up the military budgets to fight those wars. We'll be saving all that. And of course, we'll be saving the economic value of what those people who are migrating rather than actually producing wealth would otherwise do. I don't think economists are equipped to predict how much we're going to lose. I think the economic estimates are just a silly game, okay, at this point. We're looking at the destruction of human civilization. I don't know how much that costs, but it's priceless to me. And the number of people who are going to die is priceless to me. And the future for my children and grandchildren is priceless to me. I can't put any economic figures on that. I just know I'll do anything to stop that from happening at this point. And I'm sure you'll assess it, okay, in the same way. I mean, economists cannot accurately estimate what's going to happen 6 months from now. We see that in the CBO estimates all the time. How can they tell us what this is going to cost us by the end of the century? The answer is they can't. We could have, by the end of the century, we could have a tenth of the economic activity we have now. We have $20 trillion of GDP now. If we have, okay, a tenth of that by the end of the century, we could be looking at losses of $200 trillion over a period of years. I think it's just silly even to put a dollar figure on it, but that's another thing. We cannot accomplish any of these goals without taking on the fossil fuel billionaires whose greed lies at the very heart of the climate crisis. These executives have spent hundreds of millions of dollars protecting their profits at the expense of our future, and they will do whatever it takes to squeeze every last penny out of the earth. They have spent more than hundreds of millions of dollars. They have spent billions of dollars over 30 years protecting their profits at the expense of our future. How much over 30, 40 years have the Koch brothers spent to try to influence the political system? I mean, Bernie here is being kind, saying the executives have spent hundreds of millions of dollars. We're just talking about one small group of people who have poured in hundreds of millions of dollars in each election to all kinds of candidates all over the country and think tanks and groups for years and years and years. I mean, the Koch brothers must have poured $5 billion by now in the 45 years this has been going on. They certainly knew the consequences of what the oil industry was doing by the mid 70s. By the mid 70s, everything they've spent since then has been to protect those profits when they knew about the CO2 going into the air and they knew how dangerous it was. Anyway, to go on, Bernie promises to go further than any other presidential candidate in history to end the fossil fuel industry's greed, including, get this, by making the industry pay for its pollution and prosecuting it for the damage it has caused. Do you hear that? Prosecuting it for the damage it has caused. And most importantly, we must build an unprecedented grassroots movement that is powerful enough to take them on and win. Young people, advocates, tribes, cities, and states all over this country have already begun this important work, and we will continue to follow their lead. Okay, so I started this at roughly 9:10 p.m. It's now 9:45, so I've been there for 35 minutes. He then goes on to break down this summary into details, and he starts with number one, transform our energy system to 100% renewable energy and create uh, uh, 20 million jobs. I still have 5 minutes of my budget here, but I don't think I'm going to take it. Instead, I'm going to start tomorrow at number one: transform our energy system to 100% renewable energy and create 20 million jobs. But anyway, I'm going to ask you thus far, what do you think of the summary of this plan, particularly with respect to its scope and its comprehensiveness, and whether it is likely to accomplish the goal of saving our civilization? So I'm going to adjust here what I'm about. Adjust my screen here so you can see me big time again. And then I will visit you on Facebook and see what you have to say. Sorry, I'm doing my best to bring this up, but my computer doesn't want to cooperate. I know not why. It's a little slow. I don't know why. Okay, I have you up now. Let me stop the echo, if there was an echo. And let me go down. So, hi, Kenneth Brown. Hi, Bonnie. Hi, Dolores. Hi, Margot Shepard. And hi, Devora. That's my daughter. And Steve Wolfbrandt. How are you? Hi, Rob. How you doing? You see Bernie's Green New Deal? All I have to say is wow. Yeah, that's what I'm saying too, Rob. All I have to say is wow. He's going to blow everybody out of the out of the water with that, I think. Steve says, especially with the Amazon and Siberia burning as we speak. Well, not only Siberia, there are fires up in the Arctic, of course. There are fires up in Canada, very, very serious fires in Canada that are going on right now. There are forest fires all over. But yes, the Amazon is the worst right now. Maybe Siberia is the worst. The peat in Siberia. And Rob says Warren's Green New Deal is laughable. Yeah, and Biden's is even more laughable. So much for her plan for that. She's only offering $2 trillion over the next 10 years. Yeah, okay. So why do you think she's offering only $2 trillion over the next 10 years, while Bernie is offering 16.3 trillion? Do you think it might be because Bernie knows something she doesn't? Or because his economic advisor is different from her economic advisor? Rob says Warren isn't a progressive. She's a center right candidate. Well, center right might be a little too unkind for her, but she is, I think, still basically a neoliberal. I will say that. Margot says a guaranteed transition with support. fabulous. As we get into these different parts, as we get into part two and so on, we'll begin to get into the level of support in Bernie's plan. And you'll begin to see how extensive that support is. Rob says, I just bought Bill Mitchell and Randy Ray's macroeconomics textbook. Yes, that's the Bible. And Rob says, I wish they sold a PDF of their textbook. Unfortunately, their publisher is a top grade publisher, and they don't want to seem to be seen as selling a PDF of that particular textbook, nor do they seem to be interested. But last time I looked, well, I don't know if I saw a Kindle version or not. I haven't sprung for the textbook as yet. I know I will have to because that's the Bible. I mean, that's going to be the actual Bible. There'll be other books that will be very important, like Stephanie's new book that has been coming out since June the 19th. I'm sure is going to be very, very important. But I think it will be more on the applied side. And it will be more on the elementary side where it goes into the overview things. But the reference book that we will use when we're stumped by something and we need to know what the state of the art thinking is going to be the Ray, Mitchell, and Watts, I think it's Watts, textbook. And Steve Wolfbrand said, take the money for military spending. This is already twice as much as the military spending than we're doing. It's more than twice as much. So we cannot take it from our military spending. If you look at the combined costs of all of Bernie's plans thus far, if you look at, for example, the likely cost of the job guarantee per year, and you look at the likely cost of the Medicare for All plan per year, and you look at the continuing cost of Social Security per year, and you look at the cost of the job guarantee per year, you look at the cost of the regular infrastructure plan per year, you're probably talking about raising what we spend. I haven't added all of these together, but you're probably talking about raising the federal budget from its current state. What is it, 4.6 trillion or 4.7 trillion? You're probably talking about bringing up the spending to 7 trillion. Now, I hope there's going to be a lot of deficit spending, enough to offset the leakages, but I still think the spending side of the federal budget is going to rise to $7 or $8 trillion, and therefore the tax side is probably going to have to go up from, I think tax revenues are currently in the neighborhood of 3.8 trillion or something like that. They're probably going to have to rise to something close to $5.5 trillion, leaving 2 to 2.5 trillion for deficit spending. Now, that's going to be fine if we handle the deficit spending in the proper way, but there are going to have to be substantial tax increases. Okay, so now, are those going to be opposed? Not if there's a progressive Congress in there, not if we get a progressive Congress in there to support Bernie. The movement has to be strong enough to do that. If we get Congresses in there that are comparable to the New Deal Congresses in terms of willingness to support the president, in terms of the strength of the presidential party, it's called, in Congress, then we will be able to raise the taxes to get that much in taxes done, especially when we have the necessary deficits to keep everybody fully employed over that period of time. Okay. Margot said, there's no need to search for revenue. We have the money. We don't have the congressional will to spend for public purpose instead of a private profit. Yes, Margot, I always agree with that, but we also have to tax enough so that our deficit is not so large that it gets us into an inflationary state. Now, some people, of course, will say, well, inflation does not matter as long as everybody is getting what they need, but that depends on how serious the inflation is and what the inflationary effects, okay, um, but what they're doing to people, the concrete activities. If prices are changing on a weekly basis and people are having to adjust their finances on a weekly basis, even if what they're earning is keeping pace with that, the inconveniences will be weighing on people. And then when inflation starts like that, that's when the black market really starts off too, and when things can get extremely hysterical, and that can cause actually political opposition to build to the Green New Deal. So, if we want to stop that from happening, we want to stop that from happening, we have to control inflation. Now, have to remember that two of the major goals, not the only goals, but two of the goals of public purpose advocated for by the MMT economists are true full employment and true price stability. In the MMT framework for public purpose, there is no tolerance for inflation. That is Keynesian thinking. We seek price stability. We seek zero inflation. And that doesn't mean zero increase in the money supply. The money supply will be increasing all the time. But what we mean is we seek zero inflation in everyday prices in the economy. And we seek also zero inflation when it comes to asset prices. We're really serious about that. We will control inflation using a variety of methods, including, but not only encompassing, inflation. Hi, Randy. How are you? And Margot says, eye heartening, especially after the immigration issue you addressed by yesterday. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, by the way, if we get this Green New Deal going, we're going to need our immigrants. Our immigrants are our immigrants. Rob says, "You're going to read all 14,000 words?" No, but I'll comment on all 14,000 words. I'm not going to read all 14,000 words, but I'll be commenting section by section over the coming days. And the first section is the worst section in terms of detail. That's where the lion's share of those 14,000 words are. Section on transportation. So there'll be a lot to discuss there. Very important stuff. Steve Gonzo has a reference to modern monetary theory. I don't know who he's referring to with that particular reference. I will try to find out. Uh, but Steve Wolfbrand says Biden is laughable. By the way, everybody, please share this. And please go to my Patreon site every once in a while, please. And Rob Rivera says, I think Warren is offering $2 trillion because she's being practical and afraid. Remember, she doesn't want to scare the big money donors. She's a proud capitalist to her bones, and she believes in the markets and thinks she can convince business leaders to do the right thing and help them by giving them tax breaks. Listen, we can't afford any tax breaks for businesses as part of the Green New Deal. That is ridiculous. We can afford very large deficits, but not for tax breaks for businesses. The fiscal multipliers are too damn low. We need high fiscal multipliers. Tax breaks for business are too damn low in the fiscal multipliers accompanying them. So Rob says Warren isn't even in favor of a job guarantee, and that's a no-go for me. Me too. Steve says, I think Bernie's policies would greatly improve the overall economy. So there's that. Greatly improve. They're going to explode the overall economy. There will have to be measures taken to contain inflation because the economy is going to be that good. But Bernie and his economic advisors know just what to do. The MMT school knows just what to do. He can contain inflation. It will be bearable. The policies will continuously aim for zero inflation. And they won't involve monetary policies. The burden won't be on the Federal Reserve. The burden will be on the automatic stabilizers. They will be on regulation. They will be on taxation. They will be on fiscal policy. And Rob says, oh yeah, I forgot she's not even in favor of Medicare for all. What's that all about? I get the sense that Warren would govern like Clinton, and I'm done with this particular neoliberal ideology. I'm not sure you're quite right about that. I think she's going to be a lot tougher on business than Clinton was. I think she's really sincere about that. And I also think that she's going to be much more liberal in her spending than Clinton as well. But I think also she might tax too much to pay for it. But I think she'll work for clean government. That she'll work also for an honest government. It'll be much better than we have now. But it won't give us what we need, which is the war on the climate emergency. We need to have the kind of atmosphere we had in World War II with the whole country mobilized to end the climate emergency. We have no time to fool around here. That's why we have no time for Warren. She's great in many ways. She could be great as a part of a Sanders administration. She might even be very good as a vice president. But she cannot be the president until she's completely oriented to getting rid of the climate emergency and doing what must be done. And that will involve her giving up the idea that she's a capitalist to her bones. She's going to have to get used to the fact that she's got to be in favor of a mixed economy with a very, very large dose of socialism as part of that economy. She's going to have to sit still for that. Rob says Warren Mosler for Fed chairman, and Rob says Kelton for Treasury secretary, and Rob says Bill Black for Attorney General, and Steve says gotta go, bye people, and Susan Eldridge just joined, and Steve Wolfbrand says Tulsi for Secretary of State. Absolutely, Steve. I'm glad you said that before you left. And Rob said Pavlina Chernyeva for Secretary of Labor. Where's Scott the Fullweiler going to be, folks? Where is Scott the Fullweiler? And how are we going to access the advice, okay, of Bill Mitchell? How are we going to do that? He's got to somehow get Bill over here from Australia from time to time so he can have his say. Did Warren say she doesn't support a job guarantee? I don't know if she said that, but I don't think she has said that she supports one either. I don't think she's co sponsored anything in that particular direction. And I believe Bernie has introduced the job guarantee bill, if I recall correctly. So, yes, Pavlina as Secretary of Labor, I buy that completely. And what'd you say also? Kelton for Treasury Secretary. Oh, who's going to be the head of the Economics Council? Who's going to be the chief economist for the president? That position is a very vital position. I kind of thought that maybe Stephanie Kelton would but go there. For Fed chairperson, we need a regulator. We need a regulator. The Fed has to do lots of actual regulation of the banks, make sure they behave themselves. Maybe Warren will do that. Anyway, the MMT ranks are not thin anymore. We have a lot of people who are coming up who were very, very good and who could serve in high places in an administration. By the way, we need an energy secretary with knowledge of MMT as well. That would be a position that would be very, very important. Uh, and maybe Scott could fill that, but I'm still looking for the head of the National Economics Council. Anyway, any other comments? Steve Gonzo shared a piece that was published actually today in PR Newswire, which appeared on Yahoo Finance, and which said, "This Labor Day, our money will gather 500 participants to host a march for full employment and economic justice in commemoration of the civil rights movement, our legacy of advocacy for a federal job guarantee. The march will begin at the MLK Memorial in Washington, D.C. at 11 a.m. and end at the Mariner Eccles building of the Federal Reserve around 2 p.m. And Our Money founder, the Reverend Dr. Delman Coates, will use this opportunity to draw the connection. Sorry about that. For lay audiences between the civil rights struggle for full employment and economic justice and the importance of understanding our public power of by creating money as illuminated by Insurgent School of Economic Thought, modern money theory. Dr. Coates will call on Congress to pass a federal job guarantee as well as hold hearings on MMT in order to allow the public to formally interrogate the implications of our public power. I won't go through and read this whole thing, but this talks about the schedule for the day. The link was posted by Steve Gonzo. It looks like this is worth reading, so I commend it to you. The contact for inquiries about the march, there's a Dr. Tamika B. Scales, who is the program director for Our Money. And there's a link that's in the article. In other words, there's a link that's at the link that Steve Gonzo, has given us. So we thank Steve. That's a very useful piece, of information. Rob asks, I was thinking where Bill Mitchell and Randy Ray. Well, I think that Bill Mitchell probably has to stay as an advisor because he's an Australian, and I think that he's very international. and would want to keep, okay, his international focus and his focus on Australia, because if the United States goes MMT, Australia is going to think about that too. Okay, and with respect to Randy, uh, I think Randy is going to be on the Economics Council of the President, and he would also make a very good Treasury Secretary. But it may be that the Treasury Secretary is going to be Jamie Galbraith, and that the chairperson of the council, okay, the National Economics Council, will be Stephanie Kelton, and Randy Wray will also be on the Economics Council. Susan says Bernie supports a federal job guarantee. You bet he does, Susan. Yeah, he does. In fact, he's authored a bill to that effect. Rob Rivera says Susan Eldridge, I take her silence, her non proposals on a job guarantee, and never says anything about a full employment economy. Yeah, she never does. And Rob says, I just want MMTers flooding Bernie's administration. I think there are going to be a lot of MMTers in Bernie's administration. And Susan says the comment field is acting weird. And Rob says perhaps Randy, Stephanie, and Bill would be on his economics council, and no Robert Garden Gnome Reich anywhere. Well, he likes Reich, so I expect he's going to be there, and I expect that also Jeff Sachs is going to be in there, and I expect that also Richard Wolff is going to be somewhere on the Economics Council as well, and some more of the Massachusetts guys. Probably Pollen and Jerry Epstein. So remember, there's a lot of positions on the Economics Council to be filled. So there will be a mix of the Massachusetts and Amherst School, which is very well thought of by Bernie, with the MMTers on the council. Okay, Jamie is so senior and so respected in Washington circles that he's a lock for the Secretary of Treasury position, I think, or for the head of the Fed. But I think that it would be better if Jamie was Secretary of Treasury, okay, and Warren Mosler was the head of the Fed, because you can appoint a more obscure person who knows the details of banking to be the head of the Fed, and someone, okay, who's more political, like Jamie, who's quite a politician, would be great as the Treasury Secretary. Um, so would Stephanie, but he needs. I think he needs Stephanie to be the chair of, to be his chief economist and the head of the council. Okay, so Randy, the he that Randy is talking about here is actually Robert Reich. Yes, I agree. He's not an economist. I think he actually had majored in politics when he was a Rhodes Scholar. Has anyone seen Michael Moore's documentary 11/9? Yes. It's actually Fahrenheit. Okay, 11/9. Yes. Both Bonnie and I have seen it. And Susan says, yeah, we really enjoyed it. And Susan says, I wonder if anyone has asked her directly if she supports a federal job guarantee. That would be a good question for somebody to ask her, okay, in one of the debates, if we could somehow get it in there. Rob says Michael Tracy just posted a video saying that Democratic operatives saying Warren, okay, would be the nominee. I'll absolutely be upset if they steal it from Bernie and give it to Warren. She doesn't deserve it because she was running across the country, busting her ass like Bernie, getting his ideas out there. She just came along thinking she can just steal it from him without doing the work. No way. I honestly don't think, Rob, that that's a really important consideration. I think the decisive consideration is that Warren will not take us to the same places that Bernie is going to take us. No way is Warren going to put the fossil fuel companies in their place and get us to the emissions levels we need and the carbon sequestration levels we need to get through this mess. I think that right now, only Bernie has the will to do this. And maybe Tulsi, but Tulsi doesn't have the movement. So I think the only one who can start this right now, okay, is actually Bernie. Now, once Bernie has started it, and everybody knows what's involved, and everybody knows what is required to get this done, then maybe Warren could be a successor then, and maybe Tulsi would be widely known enough that she would by then have the loyalty of the movement and could step in if either Bernie's 8 years are finished, okay, or if at some point he can't go any further for reasons of age, okay, or health. But I think that's the scenario we have to look at now. I don't think Warren is fit for the job. And that's it. She's not fit for this job. And the damn Democrats, the people in the DNC, don't understand. But we have to consider that this process of selecting a nominee is going to be going on now for what, 6, 7, 8 months more? Okay, it'll be completed by June. But during this time, there are going to be more climate events, and there's going to be more weighing on us in terms of external events, and more evidence is going to be emerging, and the climate movement is going to get stronger and stronger. And these apparatchiks, these silly bureaucrats who are running the Democratic Party right now, because that's what they are, these basically political operatives, okay, and apparatchiks who think they run everything, will come to understand that the world is out of control and that they need somebody who can come in and get the climate emergency managed. And they will recognize by that time that Warren, while very, very good in many, many respects, does not have the push to get this through, to get it begun in a way that can deliver the results we need. I think we need that maybe 5 years from now. It has to be done by 5 years from now. So there have to be appreciable results that everybody can see within 3 years of the new president actually taking office. I don't think Warren can get that in 3 years because she won't have the movement in back of her. To get that done in the 3 years, we need a continuous movement outside, harrying the Congress. And every congressperson who doesn't work with this movement, their lives have to be made miserable if they don't implement this particular program. Warren cannot lead such a movement. I don't even know if she'll be ready when Bernie finishes, but she's certainly not ready now. She doesn't have the toughness. And I think she's better than she was like 2 years ago, and she's showing very good presence now, and she's running a very good campaign. She's impressed me. But when you look at Bernie and his barnstorming around the country and what he does in place after place after place, if you had time to see him in Chico, California today, you'll see what I mean. I mean, the man is just inexhaustible, and his sense of justice is undiminished over all these years. He gets stronger with time. He doesn't get weaker. He gets stronger. I don't think she can do that. Susan says, devastating to watch Obama drink the glass of Flint water in front of the Flint residents as if to say they had nothing to worry about. Wasn't that awful? Wasn't that terrible? And Rob, earlier you misread my comment about Warren, which was I said that Warren will govern like Obama, not Clinton. Okay, sorry. I think she'll be better than Obama. I'll tell you why. Because Warren is not indifferent to two standards of law. She will try to really create a system where the rich are responsible for what they do. If she gets into office, she will cost them money. She will harm them. She will clean up the government. But that is not going to do us any good if we don't get the climate emergency solved in this short time that we have left. She has to manage the structural change in the whole economy. I don't think she can motivate that, and I don't think she can do that. But she can take care of the financial justice part of it in a Bernie administration. That she can do. Susan says, I'll be so pissed if Bernie is pushed out by Warren. Well, I won't just be pissed. I will be totally panicked for all our futures if Bernie is pushed out by Warren. It's these silly people who run the Democratic Party, these silly and corrupt people, what they just did in opposing the idea of having a climate debate was so monumentally stupid. They voted 17-8 against the idea of having such a debate. It was monumentally stupid, and it said to the rest of us Democrats that this party is bankrupt. That if Bernie doesn't take over this party, it isn't worth crap. And that our only chance for survival then would be to immediately go en masse to another party and get that party grown out of nothing and taking over the Congress. It would have to emerge in just a few months to do that. But they have shown that the people who control the party now they're completely irrational. To reject a moderate idea of having a climate debate. And what they're doing is they're showing they're afraid that Joe Biden and Warren and Harris and Buttigieg, that they can't handle a climate debate. That's why they voted against it. They know their favorite candidates aren't knowledgeable enough about the climate problems to be able to handle such a debate. They know that only Tulsi and Bernie would be able to handle such a debate. That's why they voted against it. That got me infuriated, totally infuriated. Rob says, Warren doesn't have the grassroots support, spirit, and inspiration and motivation. She doesn't have it and doesn't have what it takes to fundamentally transform our country and the economy that is needed right now. A successor in can see that, but not what the country and the world, for that matter, needs right now. I just don't see her winning against Trump either. I don't either. I think Trump is going to be very tough for her to beat because he's going to keep calling her Pocahontas. He's going to keep up the nickname, even though the DNA says different now. He's going to use it to make fun of her all through the campaign, and he'll use dozens of other tactics against her, and she won't be able to respond to him. I know I'm going to be parochial about this, but I'm going to be parochial about it. It takes a New Yorker to respond to another idiot New Yorker with one line responses or 2 or 3 line responses in what's basically going to become a shouting match. In other words, the presidential debates with Trump and with Bernie on either side of each other are going to be very aggressive debates. Trump is going to be going off in a million different ways on those debates. And only another New Yorker who was brought up on these kinds of debates is going to be able to beat Trump at that game. Now, remember when Ocasio-Cortez said that Trump doesn't know how to handle a girl from the Bronx? Do you remember that? Well, I'll tell you something. He doesn't know how to handle a guy from Brooklyn either. He doesn't know how to handle a 78-year-old from Brooklyn who grew up on those streets. Bernie's going to tear him apart in a debate. Warren won't. She just doesn't know how to give and take that way. Rob says, Susan Eldridge, me too. And Rob says, I'm going to see him tomorrow in San Francisco. Chico, California is really far from me. Great, Rob. Say hello for me. Susan Eldridge says, yes, panicked and terrified. And Rob says, the irony is the Democratic establishment knows if they cheat Bernie, they will lose. So if they cheat Bernie, I would be so pissed but terrified too. I don't know if they know if they cheat him that they're going to lose. I mean, they delude themselves all the time. I mean, they thought Hillary was going to win against Trump. Rob says, you're so right, Yoda. I agree this is going to take a New Yorker to beat a New Yorker. Yeah, it's going to take someone who can take a bunch of silly comments and fire back against them continuously and beat them down and overtalk them. Overtalk him. Who do you think can overtalk Trump? It's a New York kid who grew up on the streets. That's who. Ocasio-Cortez could do it, but she's too young. She's not going to get on that debate stage with him. She's not going to have her shot at him, but she could handle him. By the way, Rashida Tlaib might also be able to handle him, even though she's not from New York. From New York, she's damn tough. Next, Rob says Trump will use the Pocahontas, the documents that Warren used where she's Native American, and also the documents from Harvard doing the same thing. It's petty, but Trump knows how to discredit people in a really good way. He does, but I don't think that's going to be enough to discredit her. But it's going to set her back on her heels. And he's going to be on the offense. And he's going to be doing all the things he does in order to drive the narrative. What we need is somebody debating him who can prevent him from driving the narrative. We need someone who can keep the narrative on track. The story of the debates is going to be about whether the Democratic candidate can keep the narrative on the straight and narrow about what a terrible performance Trump has given as the President of the United States. It's got to get through the thick skulls of people that he has been the worst president in living memory. And not just that, but the kind of beast who should never be the President of the United States. Steve says AOC would knock Trump out. She would. She would. And by the time AOC is ready to run, it will be too late for the climate and our democracy. No, not too late if Bernie wins this time around, because there's someone else who would be ready by 2024 or 2028 to run. And that would be AOC. She'll be ready by then. Actually, I expect to see by that time, I expect to be a rivalry between AOC and Tulsi. Tulsi will be well known enough by then and famous again, sufficiently famous that she will be able to get in there. Steve Wolfram says, oh, well, maybe it already is. Yeah, maybe, but I don't think so. Someone's going to have to take over from Bernie. If Bernie gets in and starts making the changes, somebody's going to have to be able to take over from him in 2024, 2025, or 2029. Because it's got to go further than 2029. These reforms and these changes have to continue being driven until the world is safe, but safe again. We have to sequester enough carbon in the soil that we drive the carbon in the air back centuries before we let this go. Drive it back to 1750. Rob says, if Trump can make the country laugh at Warren, it's game over. Being laughed at by the public is the kryptonite, of any politician. Yeah, if Trump can make the country laugh at Warren without Warren replying and making the country laugh at Trump, see, that's what Bernie can do. What Bernie can do is reply to him in such a way that he's the joke. That he's the joke. I don't know if Warren can do that. And she's also while you're doing it, you have to be able to overtalk them. I don't think Warren can do that. I don't think she has the sheer volume. So Dale Weaver joined. And Steve Wolfbrand says Tulsi slash AOC in 2000, okay, in 28. I don't know. We have to see. I'll tell you, Tulsi has marvelous charisma. Marvelous charisma. She is so dignified. So dignified. So grave. She has the kind of personal charisma, okay, and gravity that at certain times you really associate with the president. And she's very good at the interpersonal things in town halls as well. But so is AOC. And AOC is extremely knowledgeable and extremely bright. I don't know which of the two is greater in sheer intelligence, but boy, AOC is sharp. Sharp. Rob says Warren is the type of person that makes it easy to just make fun of. Maybe for a certain kind of person to to ridicule successfully. But we have to see that. We'll know more about it, I think, as the debates go forward. Though I don't think in the Democratic debates she's going to encounter anyone who's going to try to ridicule her. I mean, unfortunately, we could use a test of that to see how she responds and how she does when she's under that kind, okay, of pressure. But I don't think that any Democrat will be able to put her under that kind, okay, of pressure. I think Bonnie is coming and sitting down because she's telling me that I've been on here too long, and she's probably right. So, and Rob says her shaky voice is cringeworthy. Yeah, but she may not exhibit the shaky voice with Trump. She may realize that when she's in a debate with Trump, she can't have a shaky voice, that she always has to be very, very firm and very, very assured and very, very confident. And remember, in her classes at Harvard, I believe she was quite charismatic in those classes. I think she knows how to do that. And I don't know that she'll have the shaky voice when it comes to a debate with Trump. We have to remember, she probably hates him. And if she lets that anger and hate against him come out, it's going to strengthen her voice. I mean, she's morally outraged at him. And if she lets that come into the debate, it might, just do it. It might be the drive she needs. I won't count her out in being able to beat Donald Trump. She might be able to do it. I don't think she's going to be as strong a candidate, okay, as Bernie in competition with him. And I certainly don't think that she's going to get us where we need to go if she got into the presidency. So I'm very opposed to her in that sense. Okay, very opposed to her. Okay, I want to say good night. I've been on now, not counting the 10 minutes to get settled. I've been on for an hour and 34 minutes, so I think it's time to go. Okay, Yoda, I'll let you go. I'll see you later. Thanks, Rob. I'll see you later, too. Take care. And take care, everybody. And good night. Oh, please do notice my other key screen here. Please share, like, and subscribe, and please become a patron at www patreon.com/Joe underscore Firestone. That's me, of course. So, the stream, okay, is ending now. And since I don't have a microphone on that screen, okay, I better say good night. And here's my stream ending screen.